All right. Good evening, all, and thank you for joining us for the July 2026 meeting of the ANC3C Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting. No decisions are made at this meeting. This is just to have focused discussion on the items that we have on our agenda, and we will then decide further action at future monthly public meetings. We have a number of items on this evening's agenda, and we're going to get started with the discussion of the stipulated and permanent licenses for an ABCA application for retailer Class C tavern license for L District 24 at 2605 24th Street Northwest. The nature of the operation is a new retailer's Class C tavern with a seating capacity of 150, total occupancy load of 150, a sidewalk cafe with 32 seats. The license is also requesting the alcohol carryout and delivery endorsement and an entertainment endorsement to provide live entertainment inside the premises. Adam, this is in your SMD in Woodley Park if you want to take it from there.
Yes, thank you. I thought I saw the applicant on here. I don't see her. One second. I mean, I can talk about it if you want. I did see her. I don't know where she went.
If the
Uh,
applicant's here and can raise their virtual hand,
I
there, Adam,
saw that I
I can
admitted
come on
her.
screen. That would be super helpful.
I will, um, I can just, if you want me to go ahead and see if they join or.
Sure.
Okay, so as Janelle said, this is an ABCA license for 24th Street. This is the old Flavature location. They're not adding any seating or capacity load whatsoever. The nature of the operation is a restaurant. It will be Latin fusion food, specifically Mexican food. They've been renovating the space. I saw a glimpse of it via photos. It looks very nice. They want to be very active members of the community. They want to have like learn how to salsa dance night and things like that. Um, I know that they requested until 2 a.m. Oh, I think I see Anna is here now. At least she's showing on my list.
Anna DeLeon.
Yes.
Anna, I'll ask you to unmute, I think, but you should be able to. Anna, do you want to join us?
Good afternoon. Oh,
There
I'm
we
so
go.
sorry. How are you?
It's quite all right. Good to hear from you again.
Oh, yes. How are you? I'm sorry. I was rushing from work home. How is everyone? Happy Monday.
So we don't need a formal presentation from you,
Yes.
but if you just want to briefly go over what you're planning on doing,
Yes, yes. So,
it is.
we are trying to get the ANC support, letter of support for our business. It's the name is El District 24. It's going to be serving Latin food. So we're going to try to test out Mexican and some Central American food and see how it works. But we really want to see what, I know everybody loves tacos and wok and all of that, but we also want to bring some other stuff. So we're going to be testing the waters and see once we do the grand opening. And then our hours, what we're looking for, because we've been, checking out our neighbors and everything. So what we want to do is like 11 to 11 or 11 to 10, just to see, how everybody likes it, what they like. And, we want to have like different different days, like maybe, karaoke night, or like maybe if there's some musicians that want to come and play some music and everything for the enjoyment of our patrons there.
Awesome. Thank you. And just to confirm, the entertainment endorsement is for live entertainment only inside the premises, not
Yes, only inside, and we don't nothing wild or anything,
oh,
Yes, ma'am.
great.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
So we'll open it up to commissioners and committee members for questions and then go to the community. So commissioners, committee members, any questions, comments? All right, hearing and seeing none. If anybody in the community has any questions or comments, please raise your virtual hand or come on screen and hopefully one of us will see you raise your hand. All right, hearing and seeing none. Unless we hear anything different from folks in the community, um, that bring up any concerns, which obviously we'd bring to you,
Yes.
we would likely be placing this onto our consent calendar for our July 20th, July 20th, public meeting, which we
Ah,
can submit the letter of support to ABCA. And when were you planning on opening again?
probably at the beginning of August. So we're still, finishing up and everything. Takes a lot, So still getting all the vendors and everything, waiting on the menus and everything. So yes. So we're
Gotcha.
hoping, yeah. So if so there's gonna be another meeting after this meeting today, or how does
Yeah.
that work? If you could just explain to me a little bit.
If it's on our consent calendar,
Yeah.
unless somebody has concerns and we have to pull it off, there's no need to have a presentation or any further uh, questions or answers. So we would vote on approving the consent calendar and this would be on it. And then we'll give you both the stipulated license and the permanent support letters for, we don't give the licenses, obviously,
Right.
but
Okay.
letters in support of both of those because they have to be two separate letters. And don't ask me why, but that's
Okay.
we do it.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for everyone's support. And we look, we're really excited and look forward to coming and being able to be part of the community and serve the community and have everyone enjoy our food and also as well our services.
Great. Thank you. And
Thank
we're looking
you.
forward to welcoming you to that
Thank
space
you.
with this offering. Sounds very exciting.
Yes, thank you so much. And I will let you all know as well once we have the grand day so everyone can come through and taste the food and everything. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
You
Thank
can
you,
stick
everyone.
around or enjoy the rest of your evening.
You as well. Thank
Thank
you.
you. All
Mhm.
right. So our next item on the agenda this evening is an initial presentation of a concept for a Cleveland Park Promenade shade structure. A community group would like to share plans for the Cleveland Park shade structure for the Cleveland Park Promenade as they are planning to submit to HPRB. This is a completely community initiated and funded project. This is not solicited by the ANC or funded by any DC government agency. So with that, I will turn over the presentation to Megan and Trenton. Which one of you
Yes,
will be sharing screen?
I'll be
Trenton
sharing
will be
screen.
sharing.
Okay, let me make you a co-host real quick.
Thank you.
All right. And
Hold
Megan,
on now.
you may get started.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. We're so excited to share this project with you. This is a project we've been working on for quite some time. And it's something we're really excited about. So basically, I'm an architect and I'm also a resident of the Cleveland Park area. So basically, I spend a lot of time on this strip. I'm here with my kids, family all the time. And, we were so happy that DDOT finally filled it in and gave us this wonderful promenade that, the businesses could enjoy and people could spill out. But the things that we've been noticing over the years is that despite it being so wonderful, it's extremely hot and there's no shade, and it makes it so you do not want to stay on the strip. So Trenton, if you want to kind of start walking us through the presentation. Yeah, so this is the strip, which I'm sure many of you all, are very familiar with. But as I was saying, you'd go to the strip and it's very hot. You walk, I was noticing people were walking as quickly as they could. They were really walking through the space, but no one was stopping and lingering. Like you'd go to BZA to get a slice of pizza. There's no place to sit for the pizza. You go to Saku Saku to get a coffee, nowhere to sit. You go to Captain Cookie and there was nowhere to have ice cream, right? It's not a true public space, right? It was like kind of an unfinished space. Combined with all these hard surfaces, which was really creating a really bad heat island effect. So with that, noticing that, and basically we approached District Bridges, who controls the main street down for Cleveland Park, and we brought up this issue and asked them about it. And basically, this began the project of Cleveland Park, the shade structure. And so Trenton and I have been working on some designs, talking to HPRB, working with District Bridges. We've been through a number of rounds to kind of come up with some designs. Meanwhile, while we were working on this project, we were actually introduced to two very large heritage tulip poplar trees. I don't know if you guys know, but tulip poplar is kind of like when you look at Cleveland Park, that's the really tall trees you see in the distance. They're like kind of a staple of the Cleveland Park community. Anyway, two trees that had been around even before the neighborhood began, right? Like, so when this was before all these homes were here, and two trees, they were marked as heritage trees and they needed to come down, right? So we had these massive trees. And so, like, what do you do with this, these really old trees and these beautiful wood that's been in the community longer than we've all been here, and these businesses have been here. So we were introduced to these trees and we thought, why not marry these two concepts, right? Take this wood that's in the community and actually turn it so that it can continue to shade the community. And with that, we came up with a system of if you want to go to the next slide, it came up with a system of taking these louvers from this tulip poplar tree and creating a system of louvers and cables that kind of undulate over the strip to kind of create this really beautiful organic canopy, not too dissimilar from a tree itself, but these trees can kind of continue to shade, and provide some really interesting, cool space for Cleveland Park. And so with that, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know, DC has been identified as a city that's been really bad for heat islands. In 2024, I think we were named the sixth worst city for heat islands. Here's a map that someone had gone through and mapped all the really bad areas. And you can see as you pull up at Cleveland Park, despite it being in the Northwest, Cleveland Park is a heat island. That's that red area here. That's our strip. And so that's something that we're trying to combat by using these organic materials and organic, you'll see throughout these organic materials in the green, which we'll show you later in the presentation. So again, this is a survey that District Bridges pulled out, just basically asking the community about the promenade and what to do with it. And I will say the big key takeaways from it was that people really wanted shade, they wanted places to sit, they wanted a place to stay. And so, like, that was the kind of the key takeaway that District Bridges did, when they polled the community. So keep going. And so as we look at the map, so here's the whole promenade going from Macomb Street at the very bottom all the way to Ordway Street. And in the outline, that is what we're looking at, is the extent of what we do the shade, where the shade structure would be. Mm-hmm. Again, the blow up map, and you can see it's on, we have that, there's the intersection that crosses the street. And so we're really looking at doing it from on either side of that kind of intersection. And so now as we get into plans, you can kind of see that, with the undulations, and I actually think it's maybe better to keep kind of going along into the plans. So here's on either side, it's kind of this very organic undulation shape of, a system of, again, wood louvers and cables. And then probably best to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So the key takeaways is that, as we start to think about a shade structure, the one thing that we have to be really cognizant of is, where there's already kind of striping, where there's been already been identified as the walkway, where there's been identified as the seating. So we had to be really, smart about where we put cables. I mean, sorry, cables, the poles. And so as you see, the majority of the poles are in these small granite strips, which leaves that kind of 8-foot clear walkway space already, which is open and unencumbered. And then on either side, we're putting a series of benches that also are part bench, part planter. And that's to allow some green to grow up, because part of our system is either wood louvers, and then in between the louvers there's cables. And so that green grows up and continues to provide shading. This frontage is it's western facing, and so it gets great sunlight, as we all know, which is what's contributing to the heat here. And so that really helps in allowing these plants to grow and thrive here. This is a perfect place for this type of greenery. And so you can see on either side. Something else that we were going to propose is that, we again, this is more diagrammatic, but incorporating a play structure. So many great cities in Europe and other places that have really strong urban spaces is about incorporating play so that people actually sit and slow down and stay on the strip. And I think that's really about this whole project is, in order for our community to be really strong and thrive, it's very important that, again, we slow the movement, we get people to stay, and not only stay, but want to be on the strip. So again, that's part of the play structures, because you're getting people there, right? And that's going to, in turn, going to support our businesses and help the community thrive. Again, and so I think the important point of these elevations is, you can see, I think some of the initial concepts we had proposed were more about roof gardens, because roof gardens are really strong in combating heat islands, right? Because they're able to retain the heat much better in the water. But the thing that really was problematic was that it was too thick. And so I think the main thing I want to point out is, look how thin the structure is. And that's something that, we were really trying to be smart about, was trying to keep something that was, very thin, so that we're not blocking too much of the buildings beyond. Isn't more elevations. And then I think it's very impactful as you kind of move. So again, you see the rendering. So that's from looking at Connecticut, what you'd see from the streetscape. So again, you can see how these louvers, which kind of undulate and become cables, and it kind of moves up and down the Cleveland Park corridor. And again, this is, a view of standing, underneath the shade structure and kind of looking down, how people are in it, how, it's kind of a cozy, comfortable space. Keep going. You get beautiful light patterns as the light kind of filters through the wooden louvers, onto the ground. So it becomes a really beautiful space while filtering the light. And then again, a view from the one end of the shade structure as you move through it. So as we think about materials, again, so that top picture is really the tulip poplar. So what we're looking at doing is taking that heritage tulip poplar that comes from Cleveland Park, so our own neighborhood. We're basically sending it to a kiln and a place in Baltimore. So it's hyper local, very close. And we're thermally modifying it. When you thermally modify tulip poplar, it allows it to be on the to basically be used for outdoor use. So that's the top image. And then in the bottom image, you're seeing cables, because what we're doing is a system of wood louvers and cables, right? And so the cables allowing that green. So that's how, instead of doing green roofs, that's how we're getting that greenery to be in that the shade structure. And then if you want to keep going, so here's again some images, kind of some inspiration, kind of not quite the same, but similar images. And then finally, I think the other thing that we're starting to think about is, some of the comments have been about signage, right? People are very worried, and, for visibility. I think there are ways that we can certainly think about it and still have shade, right? We could do a signage on the post or in the planters in front, but there are certainly ways that we're able to bring more visibility to the businesses. And then lastly, I'd just like to mention that, again, this is a completely just community-driven project. We've just identified a need and we're just trying to solve for it. So we've started the first step in the process, which is starting to talk to HPRB and get their approval. Again, we've been working with them to show them designs, but our next step is to really funding, right? So this is going to be a completely funded non-DC uh, given project. So thank you for your time.
Super, thank you. We're gonna go first to commissioners and committee members and then to the public. First, I think it would be good if you expanded further on what your discussions have been with HPO, which is the Historic Preservation Office staff members, and what have they, if any, feedback they've provided on this iteration of design.
So the initial concept, we've done a series of concepts to them. As I mentioned in our presentation, we did the more recent concept was we did a series of roof gardens. And again, it was to more address the heat island issue that this overall city was dealing with, and especially the Strip. And also like the storm water and rainwater to help collect that. The problem with that was because that they were super concerned about the thickness of it, right, and blocking visibility of businesses. And so that's how we ended up with more. It's a very thin type structure. We've had zero comments from them, and in fact, I've tried to get them to sit down, and they seem to have no issue with what we're proposing. So they've just said continue on.
Okay. And then do you have an estimated cost for this?
We do. We are trying to raise about 300,000.
Okay. And then I feel like I had one more question before, and it's fully escaped me. Other commissioners, community members, gov't.
Hi, Megan. Thanks so much for this work and this presentation, and also just for the initiative. You definitely identified a problem we have for this area that almost everybody agrees with, and I so appreciate that you're like coming up with ideas and solutions. And personally, I think it looks really cool, and I like it. Um, I guess I have one question, which is. How does how do you this is presumably year round, so it obviously fits a problem that occurs in the summer, but how does it weather and what does it feel like or do in the winter? Like does it make it do you think it might make that space dark or and also will it collect snow on top or things like that or I'm curious if you've thought through sort of the full year of this structure.
So to answer your point, it should not collect any snow on top the way the louvers are because they're sticking up and down. So we imagine the snow would just fall right through. But to your point, I think as our next phase, we're happy to provide more accurate sun studies. I think you're correct that all of our focus has mostly been the summer. But we can provide sun studies to see what it would look like even in the winter. But I personally don't feel that not too dissimilar from a tree, the shade I don't think is going to be problematic in the wintertime.
Hmm. And just to keep going for a second, the vegetation, have you already identified what that might be, or is that just
No,
speculative about what it could be?
it's extremely speculative. I think that the next round is we'd actually want to sit down and talk to somebody who's more well-versed in like native plants. But the idea is that it is something that is able to grow up a cable quite easily, and it's a growing vine. So I don't exactly know what type or even types if we'd have more than one, but that would be like the next round.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I did remember my question. So Mac, I apologize before I forget it again. It would be helpful if in that Main Street survey, if they had the numbers, which I feel like I responded to, and it did ask like how you get to this strip if you're walking or driving.
Okay.
And what that number looked like to respond to the comments about putting the signage out there. I don't know that many cars are using the freeway of Connecticut Avenue and just like stopping randomly. I think the numbers show that most people that go to that strip are walking to that strip, whether it be getting there via bus, metro, or just walking from the neighborhood, as opposed to like through traveling and making split second decisions about shopping there. So if that number exists, it would be good to include in this.
Okay, absolutely. Well,
Mac, you're up next, followed by Bob.
Hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate your really creative approach to this issue, and it's definitely something we've all been grappling with, especially lately. I just have a few questions. How will this preclude other uses of the promenade, such as the night markets or Cleveland Park Day? You know, people put up kind of pop-up tents on that portion of the promenade for sales or information tents. And I just, couldn't see a height figure and if that would kind of preclude folks from doing that. Um, and then this might be getting ahead of ourselves since it's not, you're still kind of in the ideation phase. But will there be a maintenance agreement for this, both for the structure and the plantings? I know even though we don't have a lot of planters right now on the promenade, they do struggle with both plant care and kind of trash being left in them. And I just, want to make sure that this is, if this goes forward, it's set up for longevity, and it doesn't kind of become some sort of liability or eyesore, and that it, continues to look great.
that is a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. No, 100%. That's something that, again, all this is done through District Bridges right now. So that's something I want to talk to them about. And we raise the funds and like, how do we continue to allocate that, right? So it's, continues the life of it. Just like any public space, there's always needs to be a maintenance fund, which I wish DC would recognize more of that. It's part of our problem here. But we 100% would want this to be something that's maintained. Even the greens, like they would need to be, occasionally trimmed, just like, most lawns. Um, so that's a great point. And then your other question was, I'm sorry, I already forgot your first question.
That's okay.
Um,
It was
uh,
it was just, would it preclude possible other uses such
oh,
as
no,
the night markets or Cleveland Park Day?
no, and that's also another great question. No, it has not. And actually that became, it was part of the difficulty in designing this was that, we had to be very careful about where those poles come down. So as I had mentioned in the plan, so we tried to keep those poles in those granite. When you go out into the strip, there's those like, there's a like a granite site. Thank you. There's like a little granite lining on either side of that area that has been filled in, right? So the majority of the poles come in there, or we tried to also have them at the basically the edge, which is where the green strip is. So where you see those bicycles kind of are, there's another granite strip that's kind of aligning the plants. That's where I would say maybe all except one pole is. And so the thought is that vendors, these markets would still go on and would definitely go on, but they just maybe wouldn't need the tents, right? And then the height thing it's a really delicate balance because that's where we're trying to deal with like the visibility for the businesses. So if it's too high, there's a concern that the businesses can't be seen from the road. So it's kind of a balance that we've been working with talking with HPO and District Bridges with.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I just want to note for everyone real quick that District Bridges is a contractor that has the grant for the Main Streets program. And that contract goes up for renewal every few years. So it might not always be District Bridges that's in charge of the Cleveland Park Main Street technicality, but important to note. Bob, you're up.
Thanks. I really love the concept. It looks great. It's definitely addressing a need. And my questions were more along the lines of what Mac was just asking about, maintenance. Didn't know if you had like, the kiln dried popular, like what's the life expectancy of that in an outdoor setting, kind of treatments, like when's the how do you replace the louvers, and just that whole concept of longevity, if there's going to be a plan for that, which sounds like you're working on, but that was my question.
Yes, as I read it, I 100% want to think through maintenance with this. And to answer your question on longevity, we're working through that, about it. I will say that thermally modified poplar can be used. It is often used for pergolas, so it's not a new use of this in this way.
Thanks.
Mindy, I'm not ignoring you, but we're doing commissioners and committee members first. So we're going to finish up with that round and then I'll come back to you. So Peter, Rick, and then John. Peter.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together. I think a lot of things have been covered and I'll keep it short. I guess the first question is, have you run this or had discussions with DDOT yet?
That is a great question. I have not. I think that District Bridges has made comments. There's been a strategy of thinking through that really HPO is the first person that we need to talk to. And so that's what we're doing first. But yes, that is definitely coming down the line here.
Okay. And I asked that because I think it ties in. You mentioned the granite things, and I seem to remember something about when they converted this to all pedestrian, that they had something about wanting to keep a drive aisle available, which I think is dumb, but like, I don't know if that's a potential issue. And then the other question was just, relating to the concept. I'm curious because this obviously doesn't span the whole promenade. If you looked at or considered concepts where instead of sort of like a big structure over the whole thing, you looked at, and this is broken into segments, but like, did you look at individual segments where maybe each shade part is considered a tree? And then relating to the winter thing, and as the trees go, relates that, did you consider options where maybe there's like canvas that's put up in the summer that sort of like sails over the promenade, and then those could be taken down in the winter? And maybe it's like, I think there's obviously the historic stuff is forthcoming, but there's some part with historic preservation where if something is reversible or temporary, it's considered more appropriate. So I'm curious if you thought about those, or those are backup plans depending on what HPRB says.
Well, we didn't really look at the sales because we want, I mean, in my opinion, I think it should be a little bit of a permanent structure. And also, we liked the use of the organic material. I think there's something really poetic about something that was the original shader of Cleveland Park continuing to shade, right? Like there's a really great story, and that's really beautiful there. So no, we didn't. I mean, we've looked at a lot of different iterations. I think that we ended up because the big challenge, as I mentioned, is really about where the poles can go. So even with the tree thought, right? You have one pole, you can't be in the center, right? So you got to branch over. You got to come down on either side of that 8-foot corridor, right? So, and then we thought that like one big system was going to be too much. That was going to overpower, and that's why we ended up breaking it into these smaller sections.
Okay.
Rick?
First of all, Megan, thanks very much for your presentation. It's certainly reflects a lot of initiative and thoughtfulness, and I know that all of us appreciate that. I have just a couple of sort of detailed questions and then a sort of broader one. So first, I share the concern of some other commissioners on obscuring business signs. It's important for especially our small businesses to attract customers and survive and thrive. And secondly, I would think a concern that HPO staff will raise is obscuring the buildings, the facades of the buildings themselves, and the elevations suggest that that could be a little bit of a challenge. At this point, what are you thinking that the height of the pole structure and then the horizontal structure is going to be? And then the cables are above that, is that correct?
No, the cables are in the same plane as the wood. So right now we have wood louvers at the that are 8 inches high, right? With a metal system above that's holding those 8-inch louvers, right? And so you can see in elevation what that looks like.
We
So,
currently have
I guess
9'6" to the underside of the louvers, and then as the structures above.
I guess that Rick, I would say that I'm on the same team of trying to bring more people to the businesses. I think that's the number one thing. As someone who lives in this community and wants the businesses to thrive and stay, I would argue that there are other ways to solve that visibility problem, and that's something that you could see on that one, one of the end of the slides, that there are, uh, by putting signs on the street, on the poles, there's a lot of great ways to bring visibility. And lastly, I would even argue that having a shade system is in and of itself a way to bring people here. So I think that there are all these ways that are going to not only that's going to fortify our businesses and really help them stay, not leave.
Okay. I mean, of course, signs on poles and things then create a challenge for the other thing that HPO will look at, which is, does the structure obscure the facades of buildings, which, for contributing structures is going to be a concern of theirs. The other is, I noticed that you had some examples of similar kinds of structures that show what's possible from a engineering and design standpoint. Which of these, are there examples of where they have been built in public space? Because what I'm struggling with is, so who's going to own the structure? Is it DDOT? Is it going to be, a community-based organization? And I know you're raising a lot of money, but I would think you would want to raise enough money so that there is a stream of funding available for maintenance so that you're not having to raise it year over year, because maintaining a structure like this is challenging in the best of circumstances. But in public space, especially DC public space, I could just see where this becomes a bit of a maintenance and logistical nightmare. And so that's something that has to be, thought through, as I'm sure you've started to do.
Yep, you're correct.
And then just lastly, on the plan, it was unclear to me whether any trees that are there now would have to be removed as a result of your plans, because I think what we want to do is everything we can to encourage a tree canopy to grow too, because, that first and foremost is what we need. And, that perhaps together with something that is historically compatible and well designed, would only add shade to this area.
No, we are 100% on the same page. We want our trees to grow, right? So we are not proposing removing any trees, and we hope that they continue to grow next to the shade structure. And maybe that someday they're so big we won't need this.
Okay, thanks. I know others have questions.
John.
Thanks. Great presentation, very interesting and creative. The issue I wanted to talk about has been flagged by Janelle and probed a bit by Rick, but this is a big project, a big deal for the neighborhood. It's got to last. Your district bridges is great, but they might not be here next year or the year after. So I think part of your plan, part of your pitch to the community and to the DC government to get the blessing to do this has to be a plan to make this continue to work in the future. And I haven't heard that tonight, but this is way early for me to expect to have heard that. But I just urge you to, get that into your thinking and to make that part of your presentation as you go forward.
Yep. Thank you, John.
Okay, now we will turn to members of the community. Rick, is that an old hand or a new hand?
It's an old hand, so I'll lower it.
Cool. So Mindy, you're up first. Mindy, are you able to unmute and ask your question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is great. This is the first time I've had the pleasure and privilege of hearing you. Okay, I'm curious about sculpture in that space. You don't want to overcrowd it. Do I see benches there, places to sit? And also, again, you can't throw everything there, but any place for um, community drawings or kids doing something creative. There are always vulnerabilities to people deciding that their little mark needs to be there. So maybe having something structured for them to do that might work. So, what are your thoughts on these questions?
Well, yes. So right now we are proposing more benches than even what is currently there. We are proposing that we do some kind of play structure. Um, you know, I I would love to get into help with programming if that's what you're proposing. But I mean, I think that, if District Bridges or somebody else wants to get behind the programming, I mean, that's only going to help bring people there and make Cleveland Park a more viably interesting and vibrant place.
I didn't mean program as such, although that's interesting. I meant a space where younger kids seeing all this space, I don't know, a whiteboard or something, but again, that have to be watched and erased. Because spaces are vulnerable these days to graffiti, and I'm thinking of ways to prevent that or give options.
Uh, well, oh, well, I think our thought is that yes, a play structure would allow kids to play. There's actually a really great book and thought in urban planning about if you include play in your spaces, you're going to have much more vibrant spaces. And there's a lot of research that backs that, conclusion up, in especially a lot of European cities. So like we're trying to bring some of these great concepts to Cleveland Park and to, our own urban space.
And what would play define itself as?
Well,
Sorry,
so
this
go
might
ahead.
be a little bit further down the road from where we are in the process. Sorry. I just don't want to go down a whole rabbit hole of because there are many presentations and research on this play theory. So we could talk about that for hours and look forward to doing that after a decision is made on going this or not. Sorry, Mindy, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to make sure we have enough time for other comments here and then our next agenda item. So, Andrea.
Hi, thank you. Um, I agree. It's a really great looking structure, but I'm afraid I just don't think it fits Cleveland Park or the historic district. And I was wondering whether you and your partner considered trying to reflect a bit of the Art Deco modern look of the strip.
So
I yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, so I find that comment quite interesting, because if you go down Macomb Street and you look at the houses and you look at all the curls and the cues, if you actually understand the original architecture of Cleveland Park, there's a lot of curls and cues and beautiful organic shapes, right? So in a way, we're bringing those same kind of concepts, into this space, right? And oftentimes designed by a woman too. So the original thought behind some of this original architecture of Cleveland Park, that I would argue that that is this shape, right? That is what's happening here.
Okay, I will disagree, but we can move on. I don't see that reflected in the design. I do hope that you talked about having sun studies, and I think you need weight studies, snow studies, the slats. Unless they're totally vertical, then they're not creating shade. So I would question about icicles and snow catching on the slats. So it sounds to me like weather issues would be something for future discussion. I'm also wondering how the fundraising will work. If this isn't city, are you expecting the Cleveland Park residents to fund this project and whatever maintenance requirements? Well, that will have to be determined, but I'm just curious. I saw that I think there's already an invitation to donate. And so how is money being collected? How will it be? Is it going to be through district bridges? How are the finances working?
Yeah,
Um,
I'll answer the bit about like this needs to be fully engineered and permitted and approved. So all of the engineering needs to be done before it gets built. So
okay,
that this isn't going to just organically appear without city.
okay,
But
great.
if
So,
you want to
so
further on the
sending,
fundraising.
yeah, then going to HPRB does what for this project then? If a lot has to happen and there's a date in July for HPRB, what are you expecting to happen then? And then, and it just seems very rushed, the community. I mean, you're having this meeting tonight. I
I'm
know,
happy to speak to the process as well. This is the process the ANC has followed for at least the past 5 years with having these applications that HPRB, the applicant, has put in their application. It's on the July notice that goes out to the public. Anybody can see that, including us. And then we hear on the first Monday of the month from any applicants that are on that following month's HPRB agenda, which is set by HPRB. This has been our fair process and our transparent process. We notify the community via the listservs, via our website, and our newsletter that goes directly to inboxes of those who subscribe. So
okay,
it's not
yeah,
rushed. This is our normal process. So please do not accuse us, the ANC or this committee, of rushing things. This is what we do for every other application. We have an HPRB.
I wouldn't say that I'm
Okay.
being at all accusatory, so please don't put that on
But I'm going to
me.
be clear
We're
because
asking for clarity, and it just seemed to me that given all the questions that came up today, going before HPRB sounded very soon. If this is the process, that's good to know.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was providing the clarity that I thought you were asking for. So hopefully that answered it. And it's not necessarily that, again, the ANC is not making decisions at this meeting. And we could potentially just tell HPRB, like, hey, we heard from the applicant. We don't think it's baked. Maybe push it to later. Or we just don't say anything at all, or we support it, or we don't. But this obviously isn't the end of the road. I think that the applicant is just looking to get feedback from the full Historic Preservation Review Board, one way or another, to edit the design, to scrap the design. And this is the process that gets them in front of the full board to get their thoughts.
So, in other words, the HPRB doesn't need to have all of this other stuff in front of it. It's
No,
just
no, never.
okay.
This is
Okay.
the same way we do single family homes. HPRB will approve the concept if they approve it or have comments to it. And then they'll either ask for it to come back before them as the design iterates further, or they'll vote to have staff take it through the rest of the process in that the engineering and the technical stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we're going back the question about how this gets paid for the funding. What's going to be the process for raising $300,000?
Megan, if you can briefly answer where you are with that, that would be super.
Thanks, Janelle. So we have only begun that process. So it's going to be through a numbers of ways of community, businesses, grants. But again, we're just very beginning this process.
Okay. And I think to what I was saying about the HPRB review, that further informs like how much money they're going to need to raise, because it further iterates the design down to, you know, what they can and cannot do. Jane, you're up.
Hi. I when I look at this, I have lots of questions. And lots of concerns. And I think a lot of them were raised already, and I appreciate the comments that have already been made. I I want to say that it feels like it is just kind of landed in Cleveland Park. That I understand what Andrea was just saying, that she feels like it should be more tied to the community, to the architecture. I don't even know if it has to be so tied to the architecture, like doesn't need to be Art Deco or a style of any sort in necessarily. But I do feel like this is kind of like landed. It's landed. It doesn't really tie itself to the area at all. But anyway, that's one issue. I A bigger issue. Well, that's a pretty big issue, I believe. Another big issue for me is that the state of the promenade right now, the state of the trees, the state of the landscaping. If the trees and the landscaping were actually maintained and that we had beautiful greenery that was in keeping with the rest of Washington, D.C., I think it would be a much different feel. I'm very frustrated that we don't have any plan for maintaining what we have. How can we expect to take on another large project and yet we can't maintain what we have? The rats are running rampant. The rats are killing the trees already. We've seen this. Those 4 trees that are isolated on the closer up to the building side, those are not surviving. And one of them has dropped down 8 or 10 inches. I think because the rats have made such a large hole underneath. That's all I can figure. The whole thing has dropped down. But
Jane, I'm gonna ask if you can get to like a question here or
oh, I thought this was comments.
well,
Really? I should have a question?
but we're
Sorry.
kind of going on for a bit here, and I want to
I'd
make
like
sure
to
we get
make
to
my
everyone.
point. I really think this is very important that we have nothing going here right now and that you're proposing something even more. I just don't understand the theory. I don't understand the design attitude. And I find it very frustrating to even be discussing it. Anyway, no, I don't have a question.
Okay.
I thought it was a comment period.
Well, it's that too, but we want to try and get to everyone this evening, and we still have another
Okay.
application on the agenda. So I just
Okay.
put the
Great.
email for 3C at anc.dc.gov into the chat for you and everybody else on this call. If you want to follow up, that email address sends your message to all of the commissioners with just one
That
email.
would be great. Could I say one other thing is that I believe that the publicness and the size of this project does deserve more than just putting it on the agenda. I actually agree with Andrea about that. That I know you say, well, yes, sure, a house edition comes through and you see it and you move it on, it moves on. Of course it does. This is a very, very public space and a
Yes.
very prominent space, which deserves a good bit of time.
Yes, which is why on the agenda it says initial presentation of a concept and not like presentation of final design. So I meant to be very explicit and clear that this is an initial conversation and that all of these start with an initial conversation. So I I apologize if that wasn't clear, but and that I did explain this process in this meeting. So yes, initial was meant to literally be taken as initial. So thank you for your comments.
Great, thank you.
To furthering this conversation. And again, the ANC did not propose this. Elizabeth, you're up.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'll be very brief. I'm Betsy Merritt. I live in Woodley Park Towers, 1 block away from the south end of this proposal. And I'm also on the board of the Cleveland Park Historical Society. And I'm extremely concerned about the appearance of this structure. I think it's way too visually domineering. It interferes with both the historic architecture of the commercial strip and also blocks access to the commercial signage. So a lot of these concerns have been expressed by others, and I wanted to just reiterate. I'm hoping that the staff at the Historic Preservation Review Board can provide some input that could help to alter the plans in a way that would be that would have less of an adverse effect on the historic character of the district. And I hope also that you'll be submitting this to the Architectural Review Committee of the Historic Preservation Historic Cleveland Park Historical Society. So anyway, I don't have any questions. The questions I had have already been asked by others, but I just wanted to reiterate my serious concerns from a historic preservation perspective about the visual and architectural incompatibility of this project. And, shade would be valuable, but I hope that we can find a way to do it in a way that's less incompatible with the historic character of the district. So thank you for the opportunity to make that comment.
Great, thank you for your comment. And Megan, can you clarify if you will be going in front of Cleveland Park Historical Society?
Yes, yes, we are going in front of them, and we'd be happy to share why we think it's compatible.
Thank you. Kevin, you're up.
Thanks, Janelle. Building on what Mr. Nash was saying, I'm concerned mostly about the trees that are already there, and I would advocate for putting more trees in rather than building a structure to sort of substitute for what the trees would naturally provide. It seems like the city's natural solution to providing shade is by planting trees. I'm also concerned that the structure itself would inhibit the growth of the trees that are already there. This photo that we see, or this image that we see on the screen right now, just shows very small, immature trees, but those will eventually become much larger as they are across the street from this site in front of the Uptown Theater and the strip on the opposite side. You can see how tall those trees are and how much shade they provide. I would advocate for pulling up some of this concrete that's causing the heat island and putting more trees in. And if this project does go forward, to make sure that those trees are protected. I would point out the entrance to the metro on Q Street in DuPont Circle. The canopy that was put up there now has half a dozen trees growing under it, growing into it, and being obstructed by it. So please be careful with our trees. We are the city of trees. Thank you.
True story. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm pretty sure the trees across the street on Connecticut are the same, up the Uptown side, are the same as the trees that they planted on this side. But Kevin's a better tree guy than me, not gonna lie. And the other thing to point out is DDOT is not, nor is the city going to fund the purchase of larger diameter trees ready for planting. Those cost about $20,000 each. So if there's an alternative to propose of adding more trees, like keep in mind that that is the cost that could also be fundraised for. Throwing that out there. Bob, and then and will anybody else in the community have a comment on this or a question? Because I think we need to get to our next agenda item. So Bob, I'll let you go if nobody else is raising their hand right now, which doesn't look like they are.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly make the comment that in addition to HPO staff, potentially HPRB itself, this will probably get reviewed by the Commission on Fine Arts. When we did the design competition for the benches that have just been installed, both HPO and Commission Fine Arts staff reviewed that and gave guidance. So there's, I think multiple levels of design review that are going to have to happen here. And I'll just point out that both HPO and Commission on Fine Arts picked the benches that we have now that are the slatted benches. That wasn't the only choice. That's the one that they preferred. And I feel like this design really sort of meshes with those as well. That's it. Thanks.
Additionally, it would have to go in front of the public space committee too, which is a bunch of representatives from various DOE, different organizations that would also need approval
Oh, just one question, or Janelle. So thanks, Bob. I forgot to mention to all the people who said this didn't fit in. One of the ways that this slats happened is also we were trying to pick up the language of the benches that had already been selected by HPO and CFA. So I would argue again, we were using the language that was already selected.
All right. So again, as a reminder to folks, please do send comments and thoughts to 3c@anc.dc.gov. And to those of you who already have, I've read every single one of those emails. Trust me, if we could get these trees to grow faster and or be more of them, that would be ideal. However, so yeah, there's that. So know that we're reading all of these comments and taking this input, and then look for where this lands, if at all, on our agenda for our meeting on the 20th. It's unsure if it will be on there or if we'll ask for HPRB to move this to a September meeting where we have more time to collect our thoughts on it. Okay. Oh, also, public can comment to HPRB at any point in time. This is in the record, in the file. Let me just get that link real fast. And then we're going to move on to our next case, I swear. So many alerts. So I'll just send how to participate as a community member here. The final agenda and like list of if things are on consent or pushed by them already comes out a week before the meeting or the Friday before the meeting. So you can sign up for their alerts and receive that. Okay, so moving on. And thank you all for participating in that. That I thought was a very good discussion. We're going to move on to the presentation of discussion of BZA Application 2325 Porter Street Northwest, which is for a special exemption approval to establish a community center, pool, and tennis courts in the R1A zone. And I will find the BZA filing at some point, but I believe this is the same project team. And Adam, who's the owner of this project, not Commissioner Adam, applicant Adam for this purpose. If you want to go ahead and introduce it, and then Trenton, are you sharing screen again?
No, I'm going to share.
Okay, I will make you co-host.
Thanks, Janelle. I'll try to be quick. I know we have a U.S. men's national game here in 27 minutes that some of us certainly are trying to do, so I'll try to be brief. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. This is a meeting that we wanted to put on to gather feedback from the community. So appreciate you having us. So my name's Adam Vitarello. I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Adams Morgan. Went to school in 3C, high school, elementary school. And I live in Mount Pleasant with my wife and two sons, 4 and 6. So we have a really exciting concept that we'd love to gather the feedback from. We've already engaged a lot of the neighbors who I see on this call, which is great. It basically goes along the lines of we live in the city and we plan to be here for life. We love Washington. We love all the aspects of it. And certainly Rock Creek Park is a big part of it. We're right across Rock Creek Park from Cleveland Park in Mount Pleasant. And what we're trying to do is solve for the need of a third space that we can take our friends, family, and meet up and in a very kind of low impact, small format way, hang out, be active, go to the pool, play some tennis, go to the gym, do an art class, these kind of community center, community club things that you see mostly out in the suburbs don't exist in the city. And I'd say amongst the Mount Pleasant crew, and I know a bunch of folks in the Cleveland Park crew, there's this desire when you talk to people like, couldn't there be something better there? And so we, along with 20 families, local families in DC, have identified a property that we now own, 2325 Porter Street. That's basically a old school Rock Creek Park manor house. And it's literally called Greystone Manor. It's over 3 acres. It is surrounded by Rock Creek Park on 3 sides, right below the Pierce Klingle estate, the Rock Creek Park headquarters. And our plan for it is basically to turn this, property that otherwise would be, maybe a billionaire's playground, it's an expensive property, and turn it into basically a community space, a community club that is available to all residents of the nearby neighborhood. There's no referral letters. There's no who do you know? Let's judge your character. Anyone who wants to join the club can get in. It is a big property, at 3 acres, almost 10,000 square feet. So it definitely takes some cost to maintain. We've set up a local nonprofit called the Rock Creek Club that basically the entire mission of it is to support the nearby community. And the plan is to basically get this special exception for a community club and basically charge members dues and a initiation fee up front to basically rehab the property as a club. And we basically have no plans to change any of the exterior outside of potentially some ADA or some kind of Department of Building pieces to it. But really excited. This is a community funded effort, has no funding from the government or any other sources, and is really just a bunch of local families trying to establish a kind of low impact place to hang out with friends and family. So I can get into the presentation and certainly welcome feedback from all folks. Can I share my screen, Janelle? Yeah, it looks like yes. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a photo of the front of Greystone Manor. It's a really beautiful old historic house that, again, we plan to keep exactly as it is. Just to kind of orient folks, and you may have kind of seen, been aware of this, but we're over here on the right side of Mount Pleasant. Obviously, you guys over here on the left in Cleveland Park. If you go down Porter Street and there's a little community, a great community up in Williamsburg Lane, and technically kind of Porter Street turns into this little kind of gravel road down there, and then the kind of mainline Porter Street, as I'll call it, turns into Klingle Road. And so it's this kind of 3 acre property. It's right near a bunch of bus stops. Obviously, Porter Street, Klingle Road is a thoroughfare. There's tons of cars kind of going east-west on that. And then Cleveland Park Metro is about a half mile away. Lots of, I'd say, very accessible. Right on the Rock Creek Park multi-use trail, right at the bottom of the Klingle Trail, Klingle Valley Trail, which is fantastic, by the way. If anyone had any hand in that, I'd say I'm a huge beneficiary, and it's really made. I took that to school when I was growing up in Adams Morgan. Used to be a disaster, and it's an amazing trail. So it's right at the bottom of that, right kind of on abutting. So if you see, so the current layout, again, it's a little over 3 acres. You can see at the top there is the Pierce Klingle Mansion. That's Rock Creek Park headquarters. And then you can see Porter Street. And so it's got these kind of 3 lots combined into one property with the big kind of manor house. It's got this historic colonnade, which is pretty cool, that dates back to the same 1913 date. They put a pool in there in the 90s, I believe. And then there's this kind of historic walkway down to a tennis court that's been there for a long time. And then there's a original garage on the left there. And then there's an artist studio that they basically built, I think, around 2000. So it's a big property for sure. And just to kind of give you guys some kind of scope, and folks that live near there will see these. It's really magical. It's a magical little neighborhood. It's a magical property. And it's got this kind of long driveway up. That's the tennis court down there. It's got this kind of garden that we're hoping to turn into a community garden. It's got this pool that's, I think, 63 feet that we're going to basically keep as is, maybe extend it slightly to turn into a lap pool. The house itself, big kind of three-story grand house. You can see the artist studio there on the kind of photo F on the back there, the garage on G, and then the side on H there. So what we're planning on doing is keeping essentially the same layout as it is now. So not too many big changes, because it honestly is like a one of a kind. It's a one of a kind spot. And so we'll keep the kind of house as is, like to be kind of the main house. We'll keep the pool location as is. Again, maybe extending it slightly to make it into a 75-foot lap pool versus the 63. And by the way, all obviously the decisions that we make as it relates to design are going to go through HBO and go through CFA. Right now, we're talking about just changing the use from a single family home into this kind of community center. The pool house, the gym will be kind of like a pool house. The artist studio will be probably like a gym or yoga, maybe some classes. The tennis court will stay there. And then the main thing, and I think is something that we had already thought about, and as we've talked to neighbors, certainly something that we're very keen on is this is going to be a place that basically has no cars. And if you've been to Mount Pleasant, and if you go to Bancroft, where my son goes, no one drives there. It's all walking, biking. This is right on Rock Creek Park. We want to be kind of one with nature, and so we're gonna have the main entrance to the property be a pedestrian entrance, kind of right off of Porter Street down there, and then kind of curve up. If you know, there's actually a trail that's kind of this like old kind of road that kind of goes up and curves up to the head of the Rock Creek Park. We're going to kind of parallel that, so maybe 30 feet away, so that we're trying to kind of keep it kind of out of sight, out of mind as much as possible for the budding neighbors, and just have it so that people come and go there. It's going to be almost entirely like a daytime place. So mostly the summer, but also it will be open kind of year round, for people to do yoga, people to do a painting class, for the kids to play. This sledding hill is one that everyone in Mount Pleasant and Cleveland Park that I know uses kind of right above, so they could sled and then, on a Saturday and go get a hot chocolate afterwards. So just turn it into this kind of community hub. And again, that existing garden is amazing. I was there today. There's apples, there's peaches. Turn that into a community garden. And I think we want to add maybe a few outdoor amenities. We're working through that. There's something called padel, which is kind of a cool outdoor kind of tennis that doesn't have the pop of pickleball, which we're likely not going to be playing. And so we're trying to see if we could locate a couple of those kind of away from the neighbors as well. But generally, kind of keep things as they are. We are going to add a gate as well. At the property line, there's pillars there just to really discourage the use of cars. Essentially, none of the members of the club are going to be able to go down that road or park on site. If they want to come there, they're going to bike, they're going to walk. There's a drop-off area down at Porter Street that we're looking at, or they could potentially park on kind of mainline Porter as it goes up to Connecticut Avenue, where there's dozens of parking spots at kind of all hours of the day. So many different ways to get there without having to park on site, which we know we've heard from the neighbors is an issue, which is understandable. And we also don't want a lot of cars, right? We'll have kids running around. We want to kind of keep it generally car free. And so even the owners of the property, of which there's 21 families, and I'm the kind of managing member, while we have the kind of right to do it because we own it, we're essentially going to forego that as well. And most of those folks are in Cleveland Park and Mount Pleasant and want to get there through biking. And I know we have some on the call as well. And so just with a little bit more detail, you can see how folks could come to the property. Again, it's quite unique in the fact, if you look at that kind of pink and yellow road, that's the Rock Creek multi-use trail. You go across a crosswalk and you're basically at the property. It's pretty unique. So if you're going on a run, and then you want to pop over and grab a coffee, do a sauna, and then kind of pop back, or take a bike home. It's very accessible. Certainly from a bike standpoint. Again, it's at the bottom there is the Klingle Valley Trail, so you can bike down Klingle Valley, pop right in, or walk. You can take a bus, so you can walk a half a mile from Cleveland Park Metro, under 10 minutes. So it's a very, very accessible area. And this is just kind of a zoomed in view of what we're looking at. So again, the kind of house up here on the hill, leaving the structures generally as is, leaving the tennis court kind of as it is, putting in kind of enlarging the pool slightly to be a lap pool, and then potentially like a kids pool that we're looking at. Do we add for younger kids as well? And if we do that, we may try to put that also kind of tuck that away from neighbors. And then just briefly, and I'll pause. This is very conceptual, but just to show you kind of what we're thinking about doing inside. So the left is kind of the current state. It's a big kind of grand home. The right is very similar, keep the kitchen, keep most of the main rooms. We might put in a little kind of cafe, coffee bar, that type of thing, to grab a coffee in the morning or grab a sandwich. On the second floor, keep things generally, have a little kind of private kind of dining room. You could rent with friends, have a little library, some open kind of workspaces for members. And then on the top floor, they have a really kind of big, cool room with these light towers. Open that up to have a kind of yoga artist. I've had a few members actually in Cleveland Park talk about, hey, could we do like an art class at 9 in the morning? And then after the kind of adults are done, at 10 or 11 in the morning, you can open it up to kids. So if folks have been to like the JCC, there's like a big kind of romp room. So just a place for kids to go when the weather is maybe not great or if it's hot or cold out. And then, in the basement, you could have some like locker rooms and some mechanical and put a little gym and kind of pool house. So yeah, it's right by Rock Creek Park, and then you have a whole survey but yeah, so I'll stop there. Let me see if I'll just stop screen sharing. And I'll just finish with the fact, we have a team here with Megan and Trenton are helping separately, by the way, than the project they just talked about, but which is exciting. But they're helping on the architecture side, and we have David, our land use counsel, and then we also have Jamie, who's our traffic transportation consultant. So again, pretty early days, but we've submitted, I'd say, a draft of our proposal, and I'd say over the next couple months, we're aiming to get a lot of feedback from the community. I've talked to, I'd say, nearly 100 folks that are within, 5-minute bike of the property that are like, this is exactly what we need. So we have a lot of positive, and then we have some folks with some concerns, which we acknowledge and we're trying to work through. And I'd say over the next 2 months, we're hopeful that we're going to agree on a plan that kind of works for everyone, and then kind of have a final plan that we then would talk through at the ANC maybe later in September, before we go to the BZA in October. So yeah, we're excited about this. We do know it's like, it's a new and different thing, and certainly to the folks that have lived there, we certainly understand it's kind of a little bit of a shock to the neighborhood there. We do think we're going to be really good neighbors, and that's the whole point of this, is to be a really kind of a neighborhood-based club. But we certainly understand their concerns, and we're hopeful we can work through them. So thank you guys for taking the time.
Hey, thank you for that thorough presentation. And also, my first question was going to be your timeline, so you answered that.
Yeah. And I just maybe just one step above that. So the hope is, again, we're not trying to rush anything. We're really trying to gather feedback from everyone. And I know talking to Peter and Jay earlier, they said, hey, get in front of you guys, which we're trying to do, and we're trying to be good stewards there. I'd say ideally, we get through zoning over the next 6-9 months, and then we would then go in front of HPO and CFA with our kind of more kind of building plans. And that might take, you guys know better, 6 months more. And then, renovation 6-9 months. So to open in 2028. So this is not something that's going to hit the neighborhood anytime soon. We're trying to be thoughtful about it. And it's all a nonprofit endeavor. We're trying to do this really to build a community asset in the neighborhood that we feel like is well necessary, and is going to just make them turn what could be a big single family home into a community asset.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Peter and Jay first, because they probably have questions based on what they've already heard from the community. And yes, we have also been getting your emails. I've been reading all of the emails too. So just to note that received. And I know they have had separate meetings with folks in the community about this, and have relayed feedback to the rest of the commissioners, but I definitely want to turn to them. I want to note that this is a special exception, not a variance in front of the BZA. Traditionally, special exceptions in front of the Board of Zoning Adjustment look to how the property owner has mitigated the concerns of the community. So I just want to note that just saying, no, you don't want this in the neighborhood is probably not going to get you what you're asking for, but working with the property owner to get the concessions and your concerns addressed is a more fruitful path forward on this. And also to note that this is a historic manor home, which had more than one single family living there for a while and was likely historically used for entertaining purposes. So just to note, like its historic use is more country club-ish than single family home. In my opinion, that's the way I'm looking at it, and I think that's reasonable. So Peter and Jay, Peter, you had your hand up first. So we'll do committee and commissioners, followed by community. So with that, Peter, if you want to.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so I met with Adam, I've walked the property, I met with people in the community, and I think I want to add, just to the special exception, right? So if you go and you look up what the special exception has to do, I think I'm going to try to be really focused on that, which is the applicant bears the burden of proving the required findings through evidence. And I think so far, I know we're preliminary, but I think we still need a lot more evidence for some of the assertions in the BZA application. And I think another thing I want to clarify, because I talked with the community about this, and Adam has this, and it's the difference in the zoning code between neighborhood and that definition versus neighboring properties. So from the perspective of, this club, I think that neighborhood meaning within a mile or whatever, I think there's the criteria in the application. They said this is the neighborhood 80% from this. Separately in the zoning code, there's a reference to neighboring properties and the impact on those. So an example would be, right, for me, up at the top of Porter Street, there's zero traffic impact to me from this. Where if you live right next door, presumably there's some traffic impact from this property, right? So there's this distinction about neighboring properties and how these, the conditions that have to be met, how those are mitigated. And what stood out to me when we're looking at this is I think that the requirements are, it's not for profit, no retail sales. And the biggest one is under 203.1D, the use shall not likely become objectionable because of noise or traffic. So I want to talk about noise and traffic. It says reasonably convenient to the neighborhood in which it is located, which this is now a broad definition of neighborhood, right? And then under section 901, it will not tend to affect adversely the use of neighboring property in accordance with the zoning regulations. So I think that the things that really stood out here are there's this gravel road that goes down to the end. And there's this talk that we'll use Porter Street for rideshare pickup and drop off and most of the access and keep people out on Porter Street. What is not yet proven through evidence is how that will actually work. I think if you look at where the property connects to Porter Street, the way to get there is from Beach Drive. And I don't know if it's big enough to have a car pull over. And again, it's not my job to say if it is. This is where I think for the applicant, before this goes to BZA and before we have a position on this as an ANC, I think it's important that we see a lot more information on the traffic flow, on where we expect rideshare to be. And then with the gravel road, there's a few things there. One is trash pickup, which it's my understanding from the residents that... Well, someone's got an echo. It's my understanding from the residents that trash right now is picked up by the city and the residents take it out to the paved road. So presumably for this private club, it would be private trash pickup probably on the property. So I would have the question of, just the impact on the gravel road of multiple vehicle trips with heavier vehicles and if that's being accounted for. I think that there is a major issue with the gate, which is I would expect it's very reasonable to assume that there will be accidental vehicle traffic. So I appreciate that you want people to drive, and I appreciate that you're telling people not to have rideshare come to the gate, not to have deliveries come to the gate, but this will happen. And if there's a gate there, I think that the neighbor's driveway is the only place that these cars can turn around. And the road is not wide enough for turning around. So I think to me, and there's quite a few other, I know we don't have too much time, so I won't go through all of them, but I think there's a lot of kind of little things like that that are very, very relevant because they're direct negative impacts on the neighboring properties. And I think those need to be addressed. And I don't think the application addresses those yet. And then there's also, I think there's some detail about noise and events, but it would be great to see more detail about noise and events. There's been reference to there might be speakers outside, there might not be speakers outside. So I think really understanding how noise is being managed, how outdoor lighting is being managed. And I know this will go through historic review, but sort of just thinking ahead, one of the things that's come up in discussions is if there are certain things about the historic nature of the property that are potential issues to mitigating measures. So, for example, people in the community have told me that CFA has not had a habit of approving fences at the property. So, you might try to have a normal way to screen for noise or keep kids out of a certain area or keep the pool safe for kids and other people in the neighborhood would be a fence. But if CFA won't approve a fence, then, I understand it's a different review, but I think it's relevant in as much as it affects the mitigation measures that might happen right now. So I think.
Could I just respond? I think, by the way, we're not going to resolve.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt, Peter, but also kind of need to move along here.
Yeah.
This will be reviewed by DDOT under the BZA application for the traffic study. So all of that would be included in DDOT's report with the application. And hopefully, you can bring up your concerns that you've listed with them and make sure that they're covering that if the traffic consultant isn't covering those. But DDOT's usually pretty thorough in that report. And then the other thing to note is that if you plan on serving alcohol at this club, you need to get an ABCA license with the outdoor speaker stuff. That would be included as an endorsement under a liquor license. And there's also just general laws about outdoor sound.
Yeah, we no plans for outdoor. I think that was maybe misconstrued. And by the way, so we don't need to litigate the topics. These are all very good concerns. We hear you. Traffic is certainly a big topic. We have a traffic consultant who's in the midst of getting a lot of data and presenting this. And so we're going to have a plan. Do we have a gate? Do we not have a gate? I mean, by the way, there's complication of like historical easements that we're going to work through. That's technically a roadway or highway that goes through there that has no use restrictions. So we're gonna do our best, and we're gonna have a very baked plan for the ANC that we're gonna try to have a lot of feedback from the neighbors on that piece. And by the way, alcohol, CFA, historic, these are all things that we're going to have to do. I would just say that Rosemount across the park got a different but similar special exception, got CFA's approval. This is a while ago. Got a fence, got a bunch of stuff. They had a special exception of a big property right on the park that's about 500 feet away from this. So I think we're confident that we can get things through CFA that are kind of copacetic with the property, as did, Hillwood and others. We hear you, and I would say I'd like to follow up. And I don't know, David, if you have anything to add to that.
No, just that in addition to DDOT doing their report, obviously we'll have our consultant prepare a transportation study, and that's typically provided, well in advance of the hearing, so everyone will have a chance to review it.
Yeah, and again, we're not trying to litigate this here. This is, like I said in the last agenda item, this is an initial discussion. So don't feel like this is like your one and only opportunity. Again, email the ANC. And the public, of course, has the opportunity to comment into the BZA record as well. So going back to commissioner and committee comments or questions, I see Bob, who's a committee member's hand is up, and Jay's hand is up. So Bob and then Jay.
Hi, thanks. Looks like really ambitious plans. I had one question is, you used the term community center and then club, and I'm pretty sure in the zoning code, those are two specific definitions. And private clubs are not allowed in residential areas in DC. Community centers are. I know this because I used to be the president of the Cleveland Park Club, and I know there was a zoning battle many times along the way of trying to get its private club status changed to community center, and it was not allowed. So it exists as a private club under grandfathering. Talk to us about why this is a community center. And I think like the key thing, Peter was going through the list, but like shall be organized exclusively for the promotion of the social welfare of the neighborhood. I mean, what you described sounds a lot like a club. How is this a community center?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the word club center, they're kind of vernacular. The Lenore Pool and Tennis Club is one that is called a club that has the community center special exception that's kind of right up the road from this. I would say why we're communities, community center, community club, whatever you want to call it, is we are literally trying to serve the local community. It's in that's literally our mission, by the way, we just read. Our mission is to exclusively promote the social welfare of those who live around us. And I'd say, unlike a private club, we accept anyone. What private club have you ever heard about that takes anyone? You have to live in the neighborhood. You have to literally, anyone that lives in the neighborhood can join. And it's run by a nonprofit that basically is trying to promote that. So I think if you look at it, and by the way, there was one other special exception that was granted about a year ago to basically a club in Mount Pleasant that's called a Makers Collective. It's got members, it has dues, and it got the exact same special exception for being a community center. So I think there's a lot of precedent of a small scale organization, club, whatever you want to call it, that basically is serving the nearby community that has members that anyone can join that's basically restricted to the neighborhood going through this. Again, this is something that I think we can talk about in more detail. But we feel comfortable with both the precedent and the fact that we are literally doing this as a community endeavor. You can't join it if you don't live nearby. And the people that we're doing it for are because they don't have a place like this. Our neighbor of 40 years was like, we used to drive to Mount Rainier and go to the pool. And then we go to this other place and like, yeah, this would be awesome if the community could have an asset like this. So I think, I don't know, Dave, if you want to add anything.
No, I think that's generally right. And I think the other distinction is a private club draws from sort of a much wider area, either citywide or even regionally. You think about sort of the private clubs downtown, whether it's the University Club or Cosmos Club, et cetera. Whereas the community center is really focused on serving the neighborhood in which it sits. And they are often referred to as clubs versus centers, just because, again, that's sort of a English language use of the word versus the technical zoning definition use of the word. But if you think about various community serving pool and tennis clubs all throughout either planned neighborhoods or out the ones that have sort of been established in a lot of our surrounding neighborhoods outside of the city, they're very similar to this, where they serve a defined sort of geographic area and serve that community. And that's really what we are as well.
And by the way, I just had one thing is if we're not a private community center, then what is? Like, what thing are we doing that wouldn't hit that? Because it's literally neighbors coming together, buying a thing, having a building, having a pool, having a tennis court. Of course, we need funds to do it because it's private. It's not run by the government. So we have to like raise some funds and charge dues and all that to support the operation. But I think if you look at that special exception, that's meant like it looks like it was written for this. And it's hard to see anything in our application that doesn't check that box. But anyway, it's something certainly we can pursue.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Jay, did you have anything?
I did, yeah, thank you. And Adam, thanks for the presentation. Peter talked about this a little bit, but I do want to kind of go back to the discussion about vehicle flow and transportation. I know that in your presentation you have the kind of proposal to create a second entrance along Porter Street, and that would be kind of the main point of access for the property. Have you started the conversation with DDOT about that, or is it a little bit too early stages for that? And then I guess along the same lines, I mean, I think in the presentation there was a bit about possibly serving, coffee and food and that sort of thing. I mean, presumably there's some amount of supplies that would need to be brought onto the property periodically to accommodate that. So would the expectation be that, for your vendors, they would also use that secondary entrance on Porter Street, or would they be, coming up the main gravel driveway in the neighborhood?
Yeah, good question. Good questions. I think we have engaged DDOT, and again, I think Jamie and our transportation team are working through all of that. I mean, they're all for. They love the fact that there's no cars, and that there's a pedestrian entrance that people can bike and walk to. I think we'll talk to them about exactly the location of the drop-off point to make sure it's, by the way, it's, 40 or 50 feet plus from the crosswalk. It's not near the kind of accessibility entrance. So we'll find and by the way, if it's not there, there's a bunch of other places that people could get dropped off on Porter Street that has thousands of cars per hour. So I guess we're confident on that. I think as it relates to supplies and vendors and all that, the club's gonna be closed on Mondays. And so the thought is that we can kind of restock then. Now owning the property, I would say that every single time I've driven up the property, and we're putting up a camera just so it's clear to people, there's been vendors of other neighbors, Amazon delivery, UPS delivery, post office guy turning around at the end, which Joe and Lori can there's people turning around and going up there. I actually couldn't get by the other day I drove. There was a landscaping company. So I'd say the road is used. And I think the thought that, having supplies come on Monday and having some stuff picked up, I think that's very much copacetic with the current use of this 25-foot road. We'll make sure it's low impact. Again, we're trying to be good neighbors. So I think if there's supply, that's why we're closing Monday, by the way, so that there's no members involved in it. And if there's, even 5 or 10 deliveries over the course of 8 hours, you're talking about 1 or 2 deliveries an hour. It's pretty low impact. So we do think we can do that, whether it's some stuff at the bottom on Porter or some stuff through the gravel road. I think we feel confident about that. But again, I think the traffic study will kind of flesh a lot of that out.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other commissioners or committee members? And then we're gonna turn to the community. All right, I got Lori Davis up first, followed by Robert, and then Sydney and Drew. So, Lori.
I'm actually going to turn it over to my husband, Joe Sellers, but I do want to note, Janelle, with all due respect, that property, Greystone, is not country clubbish. We have lived here for 25 years next door to it. It has never been operated as an event space. There's no way that's been a country club. It's been a single family dwelling that we have lived next to for 25 years. So I'm not sure where you get the idea that it was country clubbish, but it is not. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to mute myself, turn it over to Joe, who will share our comments.
I mean, I would like to respond to that because there is an application for the historic property and it goes into the history of what the property was in the early 1900s. So I wasn't talking about anything in your or my lifetime, but what its original.
Well, and it was changed to be a residential zoning many years ago, and the historic enclave, which is a private gravel road and 4 houses. So
right,
maybe 100 years ago it was a country club, but it hasn't been for a long time.
Correct. And I read the application and I was pointing out its more original intent and history. So thank you, Joseph.
Yeah. So as you know, Lori and I live at the property adjacent to this. I lived there for 25 years. As you've heard, it's a private gravel road. It's maintained by the homeowners of the road. It's a narrow, difficult for cars. It's narrow. It's difficult for cars to pass by each other, and there's no room to turn around on the road. We strongly oppose the proposed conversion of Greystone to private club. We cannot envision a way this can be adapted to make it compatible with the residential nature of this community. As you will hear this evening, and I think you may hear from others, all or virtually all the members of our community oppose this proposed conversion. We have heard from Adam. He's made these comments about various things. We have not found any of them satisfying that would not leave us feeling this is going to fundamentally alter the nature of our community. So private membership club is, in our view, inconsistent with the residential character and historic designation of our enclave on the gravel road, which also includes, obviously, the Rock Creek Park's Klingle Mansion. We think the BZA application is not appropriate because it would adversely affect use of the property, primarily because of traffic and noise. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about traffic, but I think it's worth noting in some more detail about it. First of all, on a typical day, we estimate there are less than 10 vehicles that travel over the gravel road. Yes, the mail people come up the road, Sometimes there are deliveries made, but there's not a lot of traffic on this road, and it's designed to not be very much traffic. We understood, and maybe Adam has changed his tune since he spoke to us, but when he met with us, he told us that all the owners of the property would have the right to drive up to the house because they own the house. So they could drive up there anytime they wished. And his tune tonight may have changed. Unfortunately, we've heard his change tunes a number of times. We're not sure where this is going to end up, but that certainly was his position before. They're going to have club staff. We expect them to drive there. How many shifts are there going to be of the club staff? How many employees will be needed to serve this private club? As you've heard already, there are going to be deliveries of food and alcohol. Those are not something that's normally been occurred on this road. Trash removal is a huge issue. When we first met with Adam, he said, "Oh, don't worry, we're not going to have a dumpster. We're going to move trash cans down this perilous path that I'll speak about in a moment." We've now seen in the BZA application, there's going to be a dumpster behind the swimming pool. So it's worth noting, first of all, we don't think there's space up there in which a trash truck can turn around if there are other cars parked up there. But second, it's important to note that we, as I think Peter noted, we all have to walk our trash cans down to Porter Street because this is a private road. No trash trucks ever drive up this road. Instead, their trash truck would be taken along this gravel road with clinging of bottles and smell from the family trash of 200 people or 200 families is clearly a nuisance. And I have to, with all due respect, we have to really challenge the representations made about everyone traveling here by foot or bike. It's just not realistic. The club is apparently, according to the application, going to operate from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's not realistic that everyone will travel by foot or bike at 7 a.m. or in the nighttime, regardless of the weather or the time of year. It's just not going to happen. The proposal to add a walking and bike drop-off point path, as you've heard about, is not a viable alternative either. First, the topography of this area, of anybody who goes there and looks at it, is sufficiently hilly and wet, as it's going to make it a very difficult walk. Second, the path is going to end at Porter Street, where it is coming off Beach Drive, which is a through lane for traffic. It's going to block traffic to pick up or drop off children, party goers, trash trucks, or whatever else may be there. There's a steep retaining wall holding up Porter Street at the location where the path would come out. And there are many mature trees that would have to be removed to add a path or landing area where the bikes could be parked and riders could be dropped off and trash picked up. Given that they estimate as many as 250 family members, most of whom would be families, you're going to have potentially many more cars than that. Most families interested in such a club may have one or more cars and a nanny. This may multiply the traffic and the adverse impact this club would have.
Mr.
Members may,
Sellers, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems like you have pages and they're stapled together.
no, I'm almost
We have a
done.
lot of people that have
I know. We've waited a long time to hear Adam speak for a long time. I think you ought to give me another minute or two to finish. He's dominated the discussion up till now.
He
I think we
answered
need to
the
hear the other
question.
side.
That's the way this meeting
Commissioner
works.
Paggets. First of all, this is a public meeting. Okay, we don't speak to the chair of any committee in that manner. Adam is an applicant, and Adam has a right to present his case. You've been speaking for a very extreme amount of time right now. If you want to finish your point, finish your point. But also, don't be disrespectful to the chair of the committee. I'm sorry, but I've watched it now twice.
All right. I'm sorry if I've been disrespectful. Let me just conclude by making the point. A couple points. First of all, if they're going to be having 250 members using this pool at any one time, it's 20 to 25 feet from our house. We've heard pool parties before. They're very loud. It's going to disturb the neighborhood in our area. I want to make clear something that may not have been clear from this. Our opposition to this unique project should not be confused with any reluctance to support the development of business opportunities in Cleveland Park, where they don't impinge on private residential spaces as this one does. And that's the reason we think this is not reasonably necessary to our neighborhood. And the final point I would make is, as you know, proponents of this plan live in Ward 1 in Mount Pleasant, not in Ward 3 in our area. We ask that you represent the interests of your constituents and ultimately decline to approve this project. Thank you.
Can I quickly respond? And then
Yes, please,
yeah.
Everspace.
And I'll be very brief. Look, I hear you, Joe. I think we've talked third time. I think we can work through your concerns. I will say you're about to hear from a bunch of 3C residents who strongly support this. So I don't think it's a fair assertion to say that it's just a Ward 1, but we try to be very consistent, by the way. I always said that the 20 owners would have the right to do it, but would very likely not, because they all bike and walk. And by the way, people will not, and we'll have a whole traffic study. So let's just, I guess, wait for that. We're not going to say that 100% of people are going to bike or walk. The people who won't can park on Porter Street, of which you can go there right now and see about 50 open spots. They're untimed, unzoned. So I do think there's going to be ways to navigate this without going up and down that gravel road, that have a place for the other community members that are really looking for this. But anyway, we hear your concerns, and certainly we're hopeful to work with you guys.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, the lot has 8 parking spaces on it for when it was
Currently 14 parking spaces. We're going to leave 14 parking spaces. And that was verified, by the way, by the previous owner. I mean, he said they parked in excess of 30 sometimes on the property when they had parties, but they certainly had the 14 that we identified.
As a single family home.
As a single family home.
Thank you for that.
I just wanted to supplement 2 things. One, there's parking on Williamsburg Lane, which is what is going to be filled up. And I think other neighbors will address their concerns about that, and people walking through all of our yards to get to this property, which will not be fenced off. Number 2, I want you to think about, commissioners, please, about, is it a community center or community? Everyone's welcome when there's a $12,000 initiation fee. And we've heard either a $10,000 annual or $6,000 annual, depending on which day of the week we've heard this. So it is not accessible to many people who live in Mount Pleasant, which has an average income of about 90 grand a year. They're not going to pay this kind of money. So to get 250 families who are members probably are going to come from more than outside of the 1 mile radius.
Okay.
Can I just address that really quick? First of all, we're saying we're going to be nearly entirely from the neighborhood radius. And also from the affordability piece, that's a determination just of how many members we have. We're trying to be good neighbors and not have too many. It's just a math question about how we can maintain Greystone. So that's why it's fluctuated. By the way, I've said between 10 and 12,000, which is where it's likely going to land, but it depends on how many members. If you guys want 400 families, we can make that cheaper. And if we only have 100 families, it's more expensive. So that we're just trying to figure out how to make the math work.
Yeah.
Okay. Robert, and then Sydney and Drew. So Robert.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. My name is Robert Gilbane. I live on Woodley Road in 3C. I, along with Adam, am one of the founding members of this proposed club. News. It's about a 5-minute bike ride for me and my kids and wife to get down there, down the Klingle Valley Trail. It's something when I moved to DC about 13 years ago, I've always been absolutely gobsmacked by the amount of history specific to the various neighborhoods, how DC was developed. I do work in real estate development and construction. We do a lot of work in DC specific to historic preservation. And for me, what I love most about this opportunity is to preserve what I think is one of the defining corners of the historic neighborhood as it abuts Rock Creek. My family, along with many other friends of mine, regularly partake of the trails, especially the Western Ridge Trail, which goes right by this property. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to participate in really active stewardship of a historic property, not just the building structure, but the landscape itself by the Olmsted brothers. I think it is a rare rare opportunity where community members can come together. Yes, there is a cost to do so, but preservation doesn't come without cost. And to facilitate the ongoing stewardship of a property, I'm glad that you pointed out historically, it did serve as much more than just a single family residence. This is a grand estate and has a tremendous history to it. It's also the birthplace of modern movies, which is pretty gosh darn amazing, but that's what so many properties in DC have. But how often do they really have the opportunity to tell that story, preserve that story, and actively engage successive generations is rare indeed. So suffice to say, I believe there are many challenges. As I know, there will be studies done, there will be agencies involved, a myriad of which will be able to give their own series of judgment, which will be based in fact and not supposition. It is my hope that we can collectively come together from a neighborhood, from a larger community, to see this project forward because it is a special one, and Cleveland Park has a rich tradition in these types of projects. So thank you for your time and appreciate the evening.
Great. Thank you. Sydney and Drew.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm Sydney Gabrick. Drew is here somewhere with my 5 and 2-year-old. They just got back from a Macomb Park, so apologies if there's any noise explosion as we're very near bedtime. I will be quick. We live on Rodman Street in Cleveland Park, and we've lived here for about 6 years now. Like I said, we have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and we are really excited about the opportunity to have a type of community resource like this. We already are huge fans of the Cleveland Park Club. We love it. We go all the time. And we think it is such a great resource for us as a family to, first of all, connect with neighbors. You know, we moved here from New York. My husband grew up here, but I'm not from here. It's been like a great way for me to meet other families in the neighborhood, connect with other people, and just kind of in a low stakes way. There's kind of no better feeling than throwing my kids on the back of our e-bike and going over there for just like a low stakes 30, 45 minutes, together just to take some time off the clock before for bedtime. So, as they get bigger, to have a place like that where we can also, play tennis with them, play on a playground with other kids, would be, just a great addition. And, I think with the Cleveland Park Club, like what I've been pretty impressed with, and I don't know if other people agree, but it really kind of blends in. Like there's never more than, we went last night when it was 95 degrees, and I think there was only 5 other families there. And, kids can get loud, but, it seems like, for as much needed as a place like this is, like, there's never, huge amounts of traffic, huge amount of people, like it's always pretty accessible. And again, like we just pop on the bike and pop over there. So that's kind of our vision for our family going forward. So I'm going to be quick just because we are kind of melting down over here, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Lowell.
Well, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lowell Schiller. My wife Julie and I live next door to Greystone. We share a long property line. We also share the private gravel road that we've been talking about. We did submit a letter last week outlining our concerns with the proposal. I won't go through the whole letter right now. I'll just highlight a few key points. First, I do want to emphasize that converting a single family residence into a private club that's going to serve 270 households is going to have some pretty significant noise and traffic impacts on the neighborhood. It just will. And we've talked about a bunch of those. I do want to flag one that's very specific to our property, which is the tennis court, which the proposal says would be expanded, maybe add some additional racket facilities. Certainly it would increase the use. There is a very significant and material difference between a tennis court that's used by one family versus a tennis court that's used by 270 households. And those are noise and lighting impacts that are going to be very significant for my family and on my property, which like I said, the tennis court is situated right along the property line. Um, Second, I do want to emphasize that the assessment of impacts in the application, there are a lot of assumptions in there that really may not be feasible. We've talked about moving, traffic that would otherwise go on the gravel road to a new entrance on Porter Street. There are some very significant issues with the portion of Porter Street that Greystone fronts, which is situated between NPS land and our house. If that becomes the main pedestrian access point, the main e-bike point, the place where the rideshare drop-off zone is located, that's a huge amount of activity right behind our house. But also, that is a one-lane, one way exit ramp essentially from Beach Drive. It's how you get from Rock Creek Parkway into Cleveland Park and toward Connecticut Avenue. And so having rideshare clustering there could have some very significant traffic impacts that just haven't been assessed yet. And we do need to see what that assessment looks like. There's also a long shared ditch that runs across our property and across Greystone. There's a retaining wall that holds it up against Porter Street. And what it would be to cross that ditch and what impacts that might have on drainage on our property, we'd also need to see. It is a uniquely constrained site. We've talked a little bit about historic preservation, but just to put a finer point on it, the Greystone Enclave, it's a unique historic landmark. It's made up of 4 different properties. Greystone is one, our house is another of the 4. Um, it protects not only the structures themselves, but also the landscape, the areas around the houses, how they interrelate, and that puts a whole lot of restrictions in that may affect some of the assumptions in the application. Things like, can you build a new path? Can you build a fence? How do the properties relate to each other? And so before we reach any conclusions about what the impacts of the property would be, I think we need to understand what is actually feasible given the very unique protections that are in place here.
Excuse me.
And
Sorry to interrupt, but that is all part of this process. There is also a response from DOEE. As we mentioned several times now, DDOT is putting a report into this record. The application is the initial trigger to getting these other agencies to respond in addition to HPRB. So a lot of what you're bringing up, as already has been mentioned, like is part of the process. So this is step 1, initial step.
and I appreciate that.
Let's get the feedback now, but I just
Yeah.
like, you guys, I want everybody to understand, like, we're listening to you in this meeting, but the answer is not going to come from this meeting. It's going to come in the process. Because I feel like people are getting mad personally at me. And I don't.
No, absolutely not. I appreciate you raising that, and I'm raising it just to flag for the process that these are things that, are not only things that we need to think about down the road, but they affect the more immediate questions about what are the impacts on the neighbors, because they affect what we can do. And I do want to just one last point. There's been a lot of talk about what is a community use versus a private club, and the application cites the example of the Lenore Pool and Tennis Club. And I do want to point out that that's a very differently situated entity. That's a club that serves, I think it's 20 households drawn from a 1,000-foot radius. It's basically a small neighborhood amenity that's meant for the neighbors most immediately around it. And what we're talking about here is very different. It's a club that would serve 270 households, much larger. It would be drawn from a 1-mile radius from anywhere within ANC3C. The proposal that is before us, I think, says you could have over 50 households coming from anywhere without any geographic tie to the neighborhood. So that's just a fundamentally different character and scale of use than what the Lenore Club was done, and what I think the special exception process for community use is really intended to serve. So before the commission takes a position, we do think it's appropriate to think about whether that really is the kind of community use that this is intended to serve, or if it's something that goes well beyond that and would set the precedent for expanding the special exception process well beyond what was intended for. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Patrick, and then Patricia, and then Nick. Patrick.
Thanks everyone for holding the meeting. Just by introduction, my name's Patrick Martin, and myself My wife and our two children, who are aged 6 and 2 years old, live in the neighborhood in Cleveland Park and on Macomb Street. And just wanted to say that we're fully supportive of this idea and the positive impact it'll have on the community. Um, we have desired something like this to have for years. And I'd also note that I can understand the traffic and the road concerns that have been voiced here. But, to note for us as a family, we plan on attending via bike or walking, which is how we mostly get around DC and the neighborhood. And, on the off chance that we would drive, there's a lot of parking on Porter, right? So Porter's got a ton of parking spots, but just wanted to voice my support for this initiative. And thank you all.
Great. Thank you. Patricia. Oh, gotta unmute. Oh, Patricia, we can't hear you yet. Oh, it says you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. If you're on a headset, you might want to check the audio, the carrot.
Thank you. That's
There
exactly
you
right.
go.
Well done. Yes. I'm the treasurer of the Rock Creek Glen Community Association. We are incredibly concerned over the proposal. Our little neighborhood is Quebec Street, Williamsburg Lane, and the gravel road. As we look at it, we don't see how it can possibly accommodate the road. How you can have, we look at the traffic and we look at the traffic in the neighborhood already is very congested. And how it can possibly accommodate the traffic that they're associating. And so they talk about 270 members. So that means if you assume most of the family, it's a family membership, we're talking 800 to 1,100 members who are going to be going to this thing, and how that can possibly accommodate the little road of our neighbors. So that's our biggest concern.
Okay, thank you. And again, I think we're going to see more when this is fleshed out with the traffic study.
Yeah.
And the professional consultants that look into that rather than assumptions.
Can I have one other point? As a goodwill measure, we added 20 free memberships for all the budding neighbors. That actually costs us. We're happy to take those away if you guys want 250. I mean, I'd like you guys. That was something that we told you guys that if you.
That's not going to help the traffic.
Oh.
No, I'm just telling you that if you guys, everyone's like emphasizing 270. It was 250, and then we were trying to be good neighbors there. So we will do that. And as I said in the meeting, if you guys oppose it or don't oppose it, we plan on offering free memberships to everyone there to help mitigate some of the impacts. But that is part of it. So I'm just, as you guys know, we're trying to minimize as much as possible there.
Okay, thank you. Again, this will be done by a professional in their field. Nick.
Hi, my name is Nick Auger. I live at 3529 Williamsburg Lane down the gravel driveway. I understand there's not going to be any resolution answers the questions right now, Janelle. I just wanted to voice my concern with my neighbors. It's part of the public process. And Adam, thanks for your presentation. And I know we'll get more information as Jamie does her work and everyone else, but yeah, I'm concerned with a couple hundred members, however many it's going to be coming down the gravel driveway, all the trucks going up. I don't know how that's going to work. I have 3 young kids. We go down there, down the driveway. They're always roaming around the neighborhood. I have concerns about that. And then, yes, parking on Porter Street, it's definitely going to fill up Williamsburg Lane in front of our house, down our driveway with cars all the time. And Adam, I appreciate you saying that you're allowing the neighbors free membership for the community center. It's supposed to be. I appreciate it. It's to serve the actual community. You know, like it's not. I guess it's to be expected, right? Because you have a lot of people from the community saying that they support it, but I think a lot of the neighbors in the actual neighborhood have a lot of concerns. So I know you're trying to work through those. Yeah, I just wanted to voice my concern. That's all, and look forward to hearing more for you.
Thank you. Meredith.
Hello, good evening. Meredith Moldenhauer from Cozen O'Connor. I'm Land Use Counsel for Joe and Lori. I just wanted to ask, there's obviously been extremely a lot of questions regarding the burden that is obviously the obligation of the applicant in any zoning case. Jamie obviously is a traffic consultant who is here on the call tonight. Curious as to when the traffic report will be done by the applicant in order for the public to be able to have time to review that.
Jamie.
I knew you looked familiar, Meredith, because you've been before this commission before. All right. So Jamie, that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, Meredith, we're actually just getting started. We met with DDOT. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. We met with DDOT about a week or so ago. So we're going through the scoping process now. So we anticipate filing the scoping document with DDOT in the next couple of weeks. Meredith, as you know, it takes DDOT about a month to review that scoping document. So that's going to hold up the traffic study a little bit. We obviously can't do the study until we get an approved scope from DDOT. So I would anticipate we will have a traffic study end of August, early September at the latest for the community to review. And as you know, we're required to file it with DDOT 45 days before the hearing. So we will endeavor to get it to the ANC and the community before that. But still some things to work out in terms of when our BZA hearing is going to be. But you know, we're moving full speed ahead, and we'll release that as soon as we're able to get it completed once we get the DDOT approved scope.
You would also need to conduct that study during DCPS school when school's actually in session, correct? So you wouldn't be able to actually start that until when school's back in session?
Not necessarily. So DDOT has different tiers of traffic studies. We anticipate that this is going to fall under the transportation statement, which doesn't require us to do offsite traffic counts. To the extent that we would have to do any data collection, I think I would argue that the heaviest use for this facility would be during the summer. And so it would be appropriate to do traffic counts again if we're required to during the summer months to align with when the heaviest use of the school would be.
Given the standard, we would just ask that, you know, if this is engaging in the public process with the ANC, that, you know, this is obviously a critical element of the application, that we would be able to see a copy of the applicant's burdens traffic study before we obviously come back before the ANC in order to have the documentation that's necessary to engage in this conversation.
One piece is the good news on all this is that there's a similar club up the street, the Cleveland Park Club, that has nearly 200 members, and they have data on how many people come. And so we have a real life use case of how many people come to a club like this that we're planning on using to help augment the survey.
And to be clear, the ANC has absolutely zero intent of taking this up again without that information. So I don't know why anybody thinks I would ever be that silly after hearing all of these concerns today. And yeah, we will have that study in hand before we hold another, we would likely ask that this come again before this committee, before we take any action, and that would be really determined on when this is scheduled for the BZA. BZA meetings are scheduled and noticed in the DC Register, along with the fact that we would notice this with our newsletter notice on our website and via the listservs. We do not notice things to each other in isolation. Lori, if you're going to be actually,
I have a question.
excuse me.
Yeah.
If there's anybody else in the community that hasn't commented yet that would like to make a comment, please raise your hand now. Kind of last call here. Any commissioners or committee members with burning questions for now, knowing that this is going to come before us again with further information and feedback provided based on what the conversation was this evening, along with meetings with the nearby neighbors. Hearing and seeing none. Lori, if you have one more question, it must be directed to me, the chair.
My question is, would you and other commissioners please come and walk around this property so that you can see for yourself what the gravel road looks like, what it would mean to have a gate at the entrance to Greystone and the impact it would have on my driveway, and that you can see the topography of the property as it comes out to Porter Street. I think walking around is informative, and I would ask that you and the other commissioners who haven't already walked around here to please consider doing that before this comes back before the ANC.
Yes. I would second that, by the way. Seeing the property is super informative, so I would welcome people to it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to trespass on Adam's property without his permission. So
No.
I would request that this be a meeting with the commissioners and the neighbors and the property owners
Yeah, we would welcome you guys. But I think it's a great idea to see the property.
as one. So I don't appreciate these one-off meetings, and I would hope that the community respects each commissioner's time. We cannot meet with each community member individually. This is an unpaid position, and we mostly have real jobs too. So I would ask for a little bit of grace there. So the more we can consolidate this into one larger, group walkthrough, that would be super helpful, I think, for all parties involved. I don't mean to speak for Commissioner Nash there, but I'm assuming he'd appreciate it as well.
Yeah, I think a group meeting makes sense with the neighbors and the applicant.
Thank you. All right. Sorry for this meeting going so long. Next time we're putting a time limit so people can get their thoughts together in 2 to 3 minutes. Because this game is on now and we're losing. So any last call, commissioners, committee members? With that, look for the agenda to be noticed for the July 20th meeting next Monday, the whatever that is. And thank you all for attending and having what I think was a fruitful, hopefully, discussion and getting these initial concepts for several important projects out into the community for this discussion and advancement.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Go you.